Well, hello, Booktube. I mentioned last week that I would be back with the mother of all book hauls, and I wanted to go through the books that I got I guess it was last Sunday. Went to one of the larger used bookstores, not, well, in my state, not exactly in my area. It's a good hour away. And this was one of the larger book hauls I've done, I think. Ended up with, I think, 21 books and spent just a little over $100. So about $5 a book, which, for given that this place is not really an inexpensive used bookstore, I think that was a pretty good haul. And so, yeah, let's just jump into it. I guess I'll start with the fiction. I got mostly fiction in this book haul, and then go to the nonfiction. Let's see. I really wasn't looking. Usually, when I go to these used bookstores, I have a sort of loose idea of what I'm looking for and what I'm not really looking for. And I really wasn't going there this time to look at classics. And so I didn't spend much of any time in that area. The one classic that I did get, I was just walking through one of the aisles and saw this book. This is Anthony Trollope's The Way We Live Now. This is one of the more popular Anthony Trollope books from what I can tell from the people who know his works pretty well. And this was in the Oxford World Classic edition that I really like, and just kind of a really nice copy. So I got that. It's a little, once I got it home, I realized it's a little bit weird. Apparently this was published in 2 volumes originally, or at some point. And so, like when I open it up, like I come to a section where it's the end of volume 1, and so it goes to page 478, and then if I go a little further, you can see that, like, suddenly it's all single numbers again, single digits. But anyway, I think it's all there. So I was glad to pick that up, and I think I will be happy to, as I find some of these older Oxford World Classics, I will most likely pick them up, even if I already have copies of the book in another version. But anyway, one of the other areas I was kind of interested in was I basically filled out the rest of my Dune series. I had the first volume that I had only actually gotten recently after the movies came out, and I really liked. I had never seen the original Dune movie back in, I guess it was the 1980s, and but I liked the new movies, and I thought I would give the book a read. And so but I originally was only intending to go get the second volume of the series, which I believe is Dune Messiah, and that's actually not in this list. That's up in my bedroom. I have started reading that, and I'm actually still finishing reading the first volume, which kind of got a little boring in a section, but now that I'm in the last 70 or 80 pages, it's sort of picked up a bit. Like I said, I was only thinking that I would get the second volume, Dune Messiah, but once I was there and I kind of recognized all these other, the rest of the series was there, I just thought, well, it kind of made sense to get those too. So yeah, so I hope to finish up the first volume today or sometime this week and maybe pick up with the second volume. Still not really sure what I think of the books themselves. I don't know. I'd be curious if any of you have read any of the Dune books. If you've read the whole series, let me know what you think of them. I'd be interested to hear that. One of the other things I was kind of interested in, before a week ago, I had virtually zero interest in reading Westerns, but over kind of the last few weeks, all the discussions and the videos about June on the Range, and Randy Ray has talked about Larry McMurtry's writing and Lonesome Dove in particular, and that sort of whet my appetite a little bit to look into what Westerns were available. About the only thing, excuse me, that I've read in the Western genre, and I'm not even sure this really counts, are the Tony Hillerman books, which are of course modern day, or relatively modern day. I guess he started writing, in the 70s and 80s. And I have read a few of those books. I don't own any of them anymore. I think I might go back to that series the next time I'm in. Next time I'm in one of these used bookstores, I might look for a couple of his books. But I thought I would look for some of the Louis L'Amour books and the Larry McMurtry books. And I did get The Last Picture Show, which is that's also in my bedroom. I've been reading that for Randy Ray's Lone Star Book Club, and I'm actually kind of enjoying that. Although that's a more, I won't say modern day Western, it's sort of a post-Western. It's set in like the 1950s, and sort of is the story of a dying small, Texas town. And pretty fascinating little character study of the different individuals in that Texas town. So that was one book I got. But I don't know much about Larry McMurtry beyond The Lonesome Dove. I've never watched the TV series, I guess, that there was about it. There was the only copy of Lonesome Dove was in a big hardcover book that had a couple of other books of his in, so it was a pretty large book. And I don't know if the Lonesome Dove part of the book was an abridged version of that, because I think the actual original Lonesome Dove is like 800 pages, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so I didn't end up getting that one. I did get two Larry McMurtry books. One was a fiction book, one was interestingly a nonfiction book, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But the one fiction book I got was this. This is Buffalo Girls, and appears to be a story that involves Calamity Jane. And I had some vague sort of recollection of her, and so so I decided I would get that. Louis L'Amour I've never read, and really wasn't sure what if I wanted to try him out. And I should say Buffalo Girls was in the dollar bin, and this Louis L'Amour book was also in the dollar bin. This is The Outlaws of Mesquite, a new collection of frontier stories. There's like half a dozen stories here. So I thought going the short story way of getting into Louis L'Amour might be a good way to go. So I picked that up. And then another author I've been interested in recently, mostly because I saw the movie. I always get confused about the exact title, but it's like In the Electric Mist with the Confederate Dead, I think is what it's called, and that's by James Lee Burke. And so I've been sort of on the lookout for his books, just to try and get a feel of what his writing is like. I've got a couple books of his from the library, and I picked I picked this up again. This was in the dollar bin, and this I should say he is known for his main character is a policeman detective named Dave Robichaux, who is based out of Louisiana, the New Orleans area, and sort of a Southern Gothic kind of. Some of his writing, I think, has sort of a Southern Gothic feel to it. And anyway, just kind of books about the South, and maybe books about crime mysteries that are set in areas that are not as typical as, say, New York or LA or someplace like that. I don't quite know what I think of his writing. I like the Dave Robichaux character, and I do kind of like his writing, although I think some of the violence feels a little gratuitous or a little too like there maybe isn't quite enough build up to it. Maybe if it was there, if there was more of a slow burn to his books, I might enjoy them a little bit better. But some of the violence kind of jumps in right at you. But anyway, I generally do like his style of writing. So whenever I can get his books from the library or get them cheap, I'll probably pick up a few. And finally, I guess this does it for my fiction books, and these were also in the dollar bin, and these were two books by James Michener. This is Texas, which was written, I think, in the 1980s. This one's dated 1985. And then I also picked up Alaska. This was written in 1988. And I'm not sure how Michener is described or categorized. The only other book of his I have is Chesapeake, which appealed to me because I live in the Chesapeake area here in Maryland. And many years ago, I was in, when I first started working for the government, and they sent us on these different trainings and orientations. There was one of the speakers mentioned that book, and I don't know what the context was, but it kind of piqued my interest. And I've tried reading Chesapeake a couple of times. I do like the book, but it's a big, sprawling, multi-generational, multi-century deep dive into an area of the world or country. And so that's what these books are about as well. And I know with the book Chesapeake, I really like the beginning of the book. It starts with, sorry, I bumped the table with the camera on it. It starts in the area of the time period right before Europeans come to settle North America. And so it starts with the story of a Native American man who flees from his tribe, but then goes to another tribe and becomes the chief of that tribe, and eventually becomes like the chief of kind of the tribes in the area. And it just the atmosphere of that first section, where there's like no humans around really, and it's just the nature and just the Indians, and then of course towards the end of this section of the book, the North Americans start coming to the shore and sort of exploring, and then of course gradually the North Americans come more in force, and the story picks up with them. And I didn't think that part of the story was as interesting, but I do want to get back to that book, and I had been thinking about some of these other books of his that I wanted to have around. And again, these books were in the dollar section, so I didn't Whether I jump into these right away or not, not much is lost. I guess he's sort of thought of as like an adventure writer, but again, I'd be interested down in the comments if you read any James Michener, what you think of him. Kind of how you would categorize him, what you like or don't like about his writings. I'd be interested in hearing about that. So let's jump into the rest of the collection, which was nonfiction. A couple of these books were books that they weren't on my immediate to buy list, but I've been thinking of getting them or getting new copies. Here is this book on William Henry Seward by the author Walter Starr. I have most of his books that I think I have every book he's written. He's written several biographies about leading American figures. He wrote a book about John Jay, one of the American founders, contributor to the Federalist Papers. Was he the first Chief Justice? I think he was. And and so this book is about William Henry Seward, who was the Secretary of State in the Lincoln administration and who ran for president himself in 1860, losing out to Abraham Lincoln. I have this book in the Kindle version, and I also have the audio version, but kind of collecting this guy's work, and I'd like to have. I've been thinking I wanted to pick up the physical copy, and this is in really good shape. So big floppy paperback, and so I was happy to get that. So and Walter Starr, I don't know if John Jay, if that was the first biography. This biography was written 2012, so it's like not that long ago. But since then, he's written biographies of Edwin Stanton, who was Lincoln's Secretary of War, and the most recent book was a biography of Salmon P. Chase, who was Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury. He was Secretary of Treasury in the Lincoln administration, a rival with Lincoln for the 1860 presidential nomination, and he kind of made attempts to be a candidate for the 1864 election as well, which contributed to his leaving the cabinet. But interestingly, Lincoln later appointed him to the Supreme Court. So another interesting figure. And then from Steve Donahue's channel, I learned that Walter Starr has a new book coming out. It sounds like it's coming out in the fall. It's a biography of William Howard Taft. So that's another figure I'd like to know more about. So I'm looking forward to that book coming out. But anyway, I have all of the Walter Starr books, and so was happy to kind of pick this up to add to my collection. This next book is another kind of doorstopper. This is Freedom from Fear by David M. Kennedy. It's one of the volumes in the Oxford History of the United States. It covers the American people in Depression and War, 1929 to 1945. I had a hardcover version of this book. Unfortunately, the cats got to it in my house, and I think I got rid of it, and it was in a hardcover anyway, and I thought about getting the paperback version at some point. So I think I have most of the volumes in the Oxford History of the United States in physical form. I think maybe the only one I don't have is there might be two. There's the volume that I think runs from 1974 up through 2000, like Watergate to Bush versus Gore. And there's another book that I think is part of this series that is a book on the foreign affairs, the United States and the world, or something like that, that runs from, that's, I think, intended to capture the American history of foreign policy from the beginning through the end. I think that's a part of this series, and I don't have that book either. All right. Here's a book that I had heard of and was aware of. This is Been in the Storm So Long, The Aftermath of Slavery, written by Leon F. Litwack, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. On the front, there's a little blurb from David Herbert Donald. It says, belongs to that short shelf of indispensable works on Southern history. This was written, or at least published, 1979, 1980. It's not in really great condition. The front and back covers are a little ragged, but most of the book is in pretty good shape, and it's in paperback. And I know I had thought about this, and I had heard of this but hadn't thought about it in quite a while. And so when I saw it there, I thought I would pick it up. There's also a blurb on the back from C. Van Woodward, another Southern historian. It says, as a comprehensive study of the coming of freedom, Litwack's book has no rivals. And there's also a quote from Eugene Genovese, who was another author of about slavery, and he calls this a rich and admirably written book. So I think this comes pretty highly regarded, and not in the best of shape, but in decent enough condition for me to pick up. Jumping from American history back across the pond to British and European history, this is Bloody Mary by Carolee Erickson. And I know that at least a book by the name of Bloody Mary about Queen Mary was on one of Steve Donahue's videos. I seem to recall it was one of the book haul videos he did with David Murphy, and so there's a book by that title that Steve mentions, and I'm gonna guess that it was this book. I've read, or at least have looked for quite a bit of English British history, and the name of this author has not occurred to me, or was new to me. But interestingly, it looks like she also wrote a book about the first Elizabeth, Queen, which I assume is a nonfiction book about Queen Elizabeth I. It's called The First Elizabeth. I think if I ever come across that, I'd like to pick that up. And let's see, continuing with British history, we have Antonia Fraser's Cromwell, the Lord Protector. Antonia Fraser, author of many books on English history, author of a book on Mary, Queen of Scots, which I also recently picked up, and had seen this book before in a used bookstore. It was a much larger paperback, and at the time I just decided to pass it up. But seeing it in this format, this mass market paperback book version, and it's in pretty good shape, and becoming a little bit more familiar with the writings of Antonia Fraser, I didn't hesitate very long in snapping that book up. And finally, we've got a couple smaller ones here. This is it's actually a two-part book, Reflections on the Revolution in France by Edmund Burke, and it also includes The Rights of Man by Thomas Paine. I already have The Rights of Man by Thomas Paine in a Thomas Paine reader, but I had been kind of recently had seen the Edmund Burke piece referenced in a number of places, and it's just kind of recently emerged on my potential buy list, and saw this. It's in pretty good condition, and again wasn't very expensive. Two of the smaller books here. This is the Larry McMurtry nonfiction book I mentioned on Crazy Horse. This is a Penguin Lives, Penguin Lives, part of that Penguin Lives series. This list includes works on Buddha, Mao, Joan of Arc, Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, St. Augustine, James Joyce, etc. And so Larry McMurtry, a historian or a novelist of the West, was chosen or asked to write this volume on the Native American warrior Crazy Horse. Pretty small book, 140 pages. And I was looking for Larry McMurtry's fiction, but came across that and decided to give that a try. And finally, this is a book about the Tiananmen Square conflict and massacre in China back in 1989, I think it was. I remember living through that and watching it on TV. This is I guess a compilation of different articles that appeared in Time magazine. It says Massacre in Beijing, China's Struggle for Democracy, by the editors of Time magazine, with an introduction by Niang Cheng, who's the author of Life and Death in Shanghai. And so in the back it says Massacre in Beijing is the definitive work on the orgy of killings in and around Tiananmen Square on June 3rd through 4th, 1989, as well as an insightful look at why it happened and how the world has responded and what the future holds for the world's most populous nation. Obviously, it's been a few decades since then. And but I have been interested in picking up a book about this era and this event, and I really wasn't sure which, if there was a sort of a classical nonfiction narrative about these events. And I'm not really sure this is quite what I was looking for, but again, pretty small. It's about 250 pages, but it seems like a good primer for it in the very least. So, wow, okay, this has been a bit longer of a video than I had hoped or planned. So if you made it through this video, thank you, congratulations. I hope you're not the worse for wear from having sat through all of this, but I would like to hear your opinions about any of these books or authors down below, and I hope that if you've stayed through the end, maybe one or two or a few of these books might pique your interest and cause you to be on the lookout for them when you go through your next book haul. So, all right, well, that's plenty enough damage for today. Thank you, BookTube, for watching, and I will be back again to talk to you soon later. Thanks. Bye-bye.